The Half-Life series is packed with iconic enemies, but some never made it past development. From bizarre alien concepts to intimidating Combine creations, these scrapped foes offer a look into the evolving design of one of gaming's most influential franchises. Each cut enemy tells a story of experimentation, technical challenges, or creative decisions that shape the Half-Life we know today. So let's jump in and uncover every cut enemy from the Half-Life series. The Alien Assassin, also known as the Combine Alien Assassin and the Prowler, is an alien enemy cut from Half-Life 2. It is the original form of the fast zombie. 2, Raising the Bar, describes it as an unused Combine shock troop. The Alien Assassin has elongated arms, with long claws used for slashing targets, red spikes on the top of its head, a breathing mask, and pipes in its eye orbits, and 2 toes. It appears to be hunchbacked, and when stood upright, it towers nearly 2 heads taller than an average human. Like the Combine Assassin, its animations show that it was to be a quick and resourceful enemy, moving swiftly and performing leaps, jumps, and other darting movements. It was also to fire smoke to conceal its movements, MK3A2 grenades and knives stored on its back, and quickly pounce the player. It was also to have a zombie version, also known as the Zombie Assassin, but it was never completed. It appears as even more transformed than the standard zombie, the headcrab's rear left leg going inside the assassin's back even further than in standard zombies, to reappear near the assassin's right shoulder. The hands and feet have turned a bright red, and the bones of the forearms have become visible. The Alien Combine Soldier is an enemy cut from Half-Life 2 and the predecessor of the Overwatch Soldier. Like most of the synth or alien-style soldiers, the concept was abandoned to avoid any direct representation of human-scale alien enemies, and instead depict the Combine as a more elusive force. Its design was probably recycled for the Combine Advisor and appears to be loosely inspired by the Kingpin, an enemy cut from Half-Life. It was to move like a snake or a worm. Another version was to have dingy yellow polished skin, yellow lenses, use an energy whip at close range, and wear thick plastic gear with an insignia in the back. Based on the energy whip they wielded, it's possible they might have shown up as civil protection units. This unnamed variant was to have a sack made of translucent polygons with visible feathery organs. Shooting this sack was to cause the creature to come crashing to the ground, helpless. A flocking creature, it was to use stun gas from vents located on its back to disable the player, similar to the concussion grenade from Team Fortress Classic. Once the player was stunned, these creatures were to change tactics and all rush in, attempting to deliver a fatal sting with their long tails. It was to have a feeding tube extending once the prey has been subdued, with a stinger at its end. Groups of these creatures were to be seen all with their tubes extended, tethering them to their dead prey like a hellish balloon. This variant, named Sewer Fauna, was to have a body length of around 5 feet, just enough to pin a human underneath its mouth. It was to have a thin, whippy tail and floppy pouches, and a transparent membrane between its 4 front legs. All movement it was to make was to be accomplished by leaping from point to point, using its whole body as a spring. Concept art for the alien fauna looks similar to the bull squid in design, but has a pointed nose which could stab prey, and has an extremely long tail with spikes at the end. The Antlion egg layer was a cut variant of the Antlion species, which was to be seen in Half-Life 2, Episode 2, Inside the Victory Mine. The Antlion King is a 6-eyed enemy cut from Half-Life 2. It was to be met in the Antlion Caves, set between Eli Maxwell's scrapyard and the coast. The idea of a patriarchal antlion ruling the nests in underground caves was reused for Episode 2, the king being recycled into the Antlion Guardian. While very little is known about the roller grub, the name itself speculates that it was to curl into a ball and roll to enemies, then unfurl and attack. The roller grub was supposedly found in an old folder, in which it is briefly explained what the roller grub's attacks were. Judging by its carapace and hostile nature, it can be assumed it was more resilient than the antlion grub, and would not have died on contact with the player. The Archer's model has the size of a small shark. A fish-like creature, it was to be seen and encountered underwater. According to its animations, it was to bite the player and shoot from its mouth an unknown substance, possibly a toxic spit or water-based projectile, an attack also seen in the bull squid and Mr. Friendly, another cut creature. Its name is most likely based on that of the real-world archerfish, as they share similar behaviours. The assault synth was a synth cut from Half-Life 2. It can be seen near a crab synth in Raising the Bar. While no name or description is given, it was probably to fight along crab synths. Given the size of the crab synth model, it was likely to have the size of a head crab. The attack synth is a synth cut from Half-Life 2. It was to have 9 possibly sensory organs on its forward surface, and 6 weapon barrels on each side. It was to also be a boss, as it was to be as big as a strider though much more armoured. The charger was to be a 2-legged insect-like creature, with a small head dotted with 2 moving flaps, possibly ears, since holes can be seen in the inner sides, that could cover its head completely. It was to have 7 eyes, 3 big and 4 small, randomly spread around its face, or only 3, depending on the 2 textures files, 6 pointed teeth, and overall colours similar to that of the bull squid. While its model is more insect-like, its original concept was more like a demonic bipedal monster, without wings and a ruminant-like tail. It appears that once it notices the player, it was to charge towards them, wrap its head in its flaps, probably to increase velocity, then hit them with its legs at the end of the charge. Other animations show it firing with its mouth, likely some toxic spit in the same vein of the bull squid or the antlion worker. The Combine Assassin is mostly a slimmer and female version of the Overwatch Elite, with an almost identical helmet. She uses 2 automatic pistols, and originally some kind of rifle, and a variety of melee attacks. She is shown to be a quick and resourceful enemy, moving swiftly and performing flips, rolls, and other movements. She also wears heel springs, recycled as the advanced knee replacement for Chell in Portal, that improves her movements and speed. The armour and padding are almost completely absent, allowing the assassin to move quickly. When she dies, the light on her helmet slowly goes off. 5 individuals were to be seen stored frozen in tanks in the Borealis. The Combine Elite was to use at least 4 weapons: the XM29 OICW, J-Test, MP5K, and Combine SAPS-12. Concept art shows a Combine Elite wielding a heavy machine gun, very reminiscent of the cut GR9, indicating the soldier may have been planned to use the GR9, however it never went past concept phase. The Elite is a transhuman unit. His human face, visible through his large yellow goggles on his gas mask, appears to be located unnaturally low, in between the soldier's shoulders. His head location is presumably the outcome of surgical modifications by the Combine. What is present in the original location of his head is unknown. The rest of his body is covered in a bulky full bodysuit, presumably some form of armour. If his suit was also meant to enable the soldier to use holographic camouflage to blend with anything behind him, much like his predecessor, the Sniper Elite is unknown. Just like the Combine Sniper Elite, the Combine Elite uses extremely similar code as the Sniper. Whenever the Elite or the Sniper Elite is in front of an object or a wall, his camouflage's colour will change into that of the surrounding environment. There are some objects and surfaces the camouflage won't work on, but otherwise the feature is fully functional. The Combine Guard was to wield a large weapon, the Combine Guard Gun, that was to fire a powerful disintegration beam, recycled for the Strider, that the player would have been able to use after defeating it. It was also to use it to kick its opponent at close range, much like the retail Overwatch soldiers. Another smaller weapon is featured on its left wrist. Its camera was going to shoot a laser, but was cut due to the fact the Combine Guard already had 2 weapons, with the camera attachment being the real head of the soldier, according to its texture file, named head.vtf. It is likely that the man inside the robotic suit was to be blind, his eyes seeming to have been somehow removed. It would have made it a disturbing sight for humans, who would tend to look at its human face and be unaware of the direction its real head is actually looking at. A breather is also in the human mouth, implying it is breathing the ambient air, filtered, and still uses some form of lungs. The Combine Guard was to be impervious to some bullets, requiring the player to use physics objects or heavier weapons to stun it and knock it down by using the gravity gun. After it was knocked down, more objects or explosives could be used to break off and damage its armour bit by bit. Once its armour is sufficiently damaged, it would be disabled but not killed. Damaging it again would kill it, but doing so will crash the game. The Combine Guard is a part human, part synth unit. The Combine Guard was apparently the first humanoid unit to have been suggested, and was probably an early higher ranked civil protection unit, like the Elite Metro Cop. Concept art from Half-Life 2, Raising the Bar, shows a soldier with a long trench coat, inspired in part by the German SS uniforms of World War II. The different helmet versions were the basis of the final Metro Cop, and the Overwatch Soldier. The Combine Guard was to use a shotgun instead of an XM29 OICW. The Combine mobile mine never made it past concept art, so it was never scripted. It was to have a white shell on the top that would have protected it from bullets. Originally designed as an existing Combine creature, it was to be a sort of small humanoid strider in size, similar in size to a human. It was to be seen in the Citadel, and could also be a later version of the mech in the Weather Control story fragment. Like the strider, it bears maroon lines on its legs, while its white version was to also have maroon lines on the arms, the number 314 on the chest, as well as 2 maroon triangles in a circle on the arm. Of note is that the 314 number can also be found on the outfit of the Overwatch Soldier model featured in the playable Half-Life 2 beta, as well as in the advisor pod name 314 URB LLOC 0017, while the 2 triangles in a circle can be found on the retail Overwatch Soldier model with different colours. The Combine Synth Elite Soldier is probably a descendant of the mech featured in the Weather Control story fragment. The Combine Elite is mentioned in the Alex story fragment, possibly being this unit, although the Combine Super Soldier would also fit the description, both being early Elite Combine units. It was to be very athletic, just like the Combine Assassin being able to be swift and fast, being able to jump from large areas, and being able to tank some bullets. It was to also be very stealth-like and move quietly. Raising the Bar features concept art for several versions, most of them sporting a big left arm, generally sporting a weapon, and a thinner right one. Some aspects in these concepts also bear similarities with the Hunter, especially its legs. Some concepts evolved into the Combine Guard, others into the Combine Super Soldier, to finally end up with the Overwatch Elite. The wall turret is a Combine turret that is built into the wall of certain rooms in Combine buildings or structures. These turrets were to be very unaffected by, and have a similar range as the Combine ceiling turret. Just like the ceiling turret, they cannot be removed from their walls. The turrets, however, were cut during the 2003 era of Half-Life 2, and its model can still be found in the Half-Life 2 beta files. Mostly the city scanner with a different skin, it is the first known mechanical scanner to have been scripted. The other differences with the city scanner is that it throws deadly gas and fire from the small ergots on its 2 sides as a defense, has slightly different sounds, and its tail appears shorter than the city scanner. It is featured in the playable Half-Life 2 beta. Dog originally had a scrapped combat for a head, which was changed to a city scanner when the latter succeeded to the combat. The conscripts are a human Combine unit and an undercover resistance faction cut from Half-Life 2. They were to be the remains of the former Earth forces requisitioned and unwillingly reincorporated into the Combine units as low-rank human Combine soldiers, apparently even lower than the civil protection. Conscripts were to be headed by the cut character Captain Vance. Despite being ultimately cut from the game, Overwatch announcements and in-game references to them still appear, apparently as leftovers. In the early stages of the game's production, Breen was not known as the Administrator, but rather as the Consul, who was a slightly different character, more in the vein of Big Brother from the novel 1984. During the course of the game, the Consul was to become immortal through Combine artificial life support technology, and the player would not discover this fact before the end of the game, seeing only Breen's face on the monitors, while his body was more and more transformed. The Consul was to be seen in Eli's slideshow at the foot of a radio tower, wearing a headset, hands raised high to dropships as he proclaimed Earth's surrender. Consul posters were to be seen in the train during the original opening sequence, with words such as "The Consul says," "Relax," and "The Consul says," "Report." On these posters he is described as having an owl-eyed solemn face, watching over the passengers. The cremator, also known as the Combine Janitor, is a passive enemy cut from both Half-Life 2 and Half-Life Alyx. The cremator is mainly known as a Combine Janitor of sorts, and was originally intended to remove corpses from the city streets by burning them, clean up wasteland trains coming into the city from any wildlife that might have held on to it during the journey by exterminating them, and patrol some parts of the wasteland, such as train depots. It was also apparently supposed to occasionally fight the player. The cremator is somewhat notable as it was an enemy the developers were very attached to the point that references to it remain in the final game, and the idea of reintroducing it into the canon Half-Life universe was toyed with during development on Half-Life Alyx almost 20 years later. The cremator was to be breathing heavily at almost all times, resulting in a rather dark ambience around, alerting anyone in a radius of its presence. It was mainly to be seen disposing of dead bodies through the use of its immolator, a large plasmathor capable of spraying a green beam, which would disintegrate organic matter upon contact. It was intended for the player to obtain an immolator, which would have been effective against organic enemies. The cremator was cut as an enemy from the retail version of Half-Life 2, but as an Easter egg in Eli Vance's lab at Black Mesa East, there is a cremator's head apparently preserved in formaldehyde, on the table located to the right of the teleport. Eli mentions that Alex brought it in, stating, "We're still not sure what that does." Alex brings in the strangest things. A nearby computer screen with some sort of scan of the cremator head on it also suggests it is studied by Eli or someone else. Just like the Overwatch soldier has the Overwatch Elite in the final release, Civil Protection were to originally have a Elite unit as well. The appearance for it was supposed to look very similar to the Civil Protection model, but with a different helmet and yellow eyes, along with a red patch on the chest, red shoulder pads and grey trousers, and the same uniform, albeit with some colour difference. In Half-Life 2, Raising the Bar, the model for the Elite was showcased, although the full model for it didn't appear when the Half-Life 2 beta leak happened in 2003. Eventually, when the 2016 to 2017 leak of Half-Life 2 occurred, the entire model and textures were found. Looking into the files, the texture's name for the model is named Super Cop. She was to originally appear in Half-Life Alpha, but doesn't however appear in the beta's files. She was to originally appear in the Communications Center, also known as the X-Lab, chapter, as she was to act as the lab's head scientist. Originally, she was to give the player a quest of aligning a satellite located elsewhere in Black Mesa for her. When the player returned, the player would find out about her rationale cause, as it was found out she had betrayed the player by calling in the HECU to kill the player. However, Valve didn't have the correct way of scripting and modelling the scene at the time they wanted it to work, so the team decided to scrap this idea early on during development. Described as a living balloon with a faintly glowing head, it is held aloft by buoyant gases trapped in its head membrane. The wing on its rear portion is fully articulated like a bat wing, tipped with poisonous spines, and serves as a sail. It has feathery antennae, much like a moth, tasting air to look for groupmates or food. Passive when not attacked, it was to use an orifice to shoot projectiles at the player with gas when attacked. In early versions of Half-Life 2, the player was to maneuver missiles around certain areas. The HK-707 was to be a static autocannon designed to destroy these missiles with its two cannons. Its model also has a Jibs version, showing it was to be destroyable. Its design is somewhat similar to the suppression device, located at the top of the Overwatch Nexus in Half-Life 2, and the texture under its top features shapes recalling the Citadel core logo. It also recalls the HECU-controlled mounted missile launchers seen in the Black Mesa transit system in Half-Life. It is unknown if it was to be automatic or operated by an NPC, although it features a handle on its back. Reusing the model of GLaDOS's Curiosity core, the turret was to emit a laser similar to that of the Aperture Science Sentry turret, or the Rocket Sentry, except that it was to be light blue in colour and burn the player in a way similar to that of the Thermal Discouragement beam. A pre-release screenshot depicts it dangling from a wire attached to the ceiling, which would explain its name. Originally showcased in gameplay videos of early Half-Life builds, the human sergeant can be found in the Half-Life model files, as many other enemies cut from the game. He is also featured in the Half-Life SDK files, where larger texture files can be found. As a squad leader of sorts, he was to smoke a cigar, have a flat-top haircut, and a bad attitude. He was also to command grunt squads, and be in radio contact with command. According to his concept art image, featured in Raising the Bar, he was originally to use spray bullets with the M60, fire his dual-law rocket launchers, and punch the player if they got too close. Later on, the M60 was replaced by a minigun and the rocket launchers with a backpack. The combat knife is also on his textures, though it is unsure if it was to be a weapon used by him or not. The Hydra, a worm-like creature, was to be a massive colonial organism made out of 3 neon blue tentacles that went up to the surface. Each tentacle was to end with a different head. Its body was to be made of gelatinous, transparent flesh, with organs clearly visible. It was to be seen in the underground sections of City 17 and along outside canals. Its earliest use was consisting of a scripted sequence set in the City 17 sewers, during which an Overwatch soldier is impaled by one of the three heads, right after Gordon catches up with Alex, her telling him, "There you are, I wondered what was keeping you. Hope you didn't have any trouble finding me." When noticing him, then saying, "Uh-oh," when the soldier and the Hydra appear. One of its heads was to be pointed and capable of piercing through its victims, while the other's behaviour is unsure. The pointed head model is unnamed and appears first in the scripted sequence. The two others appear right after, at which point the scripted sequence stops. One is named Seer, the other Smacker. Seer was probably to act as some kind of sensor, given its name and its finger-like protuberances, while Smacker was probably to smack victims like a fist, or grab them like a hand, given its shape. First revealed among the new game files included in the release of the Half-Life Alyx Workshop tools. The Jelly Blobber is a blue jellyfish-like creature that can float. Lacking any obvious eyes, it has several long tentacles at the front and underside of its body, several shorter feelers along its midsection, a fin along its top, a green and yellow sac at its bottom, and a thin tail. It appears to be a non-hostile entity that would harmlessly fly around areas in the quarantine zone that are overrun with Zen infestation. Little else is known about the creature, as there are no remnants indicating where it was specifically intended to appear, or what else it may have done. The K-27, also known as the Combine helicopter, is a recycled Soviet helicopter reused by the Combine that was cut from Half-Life 2. It was to be used by both the Combine and the conscripts. In the 2003 storyline variant, the K-27 was to act the same way as the Hunter Chopper did when first appeared and attacked the player whenever it saw them. It would use its autocannon to shoot slow bursting shots at the player. Twice the height of an average person, it was to have a massive brain filling its entire body, with 4 eye stalks spaced evenly around it. An early version was to walk on 3 chitinous legs with a clicking sound. A later version traded the rear leg for a thick worm-like tail. It was to be found at least on Zen in some caves. Its psionic attacks and psionic defenses would have made it immune to missile weapons, although this is unconfirmed. The Merkava is a vehicle cut from Half-Life 2. A recycled Israeli main battle tank, it was meant to be used by the conscripts and the Combine. It was to appear as a mini-boss, coming out of a garage that Gordon unlocks. Once unlocked, the tank would come out and start blasting at Freeman, reloading every 4 seconds. The only way to destroy it is to use a FIM-92 Stinger or a Resistance RPG. Helena Mossman is a character cut from Half-Life 2. She is the predecessor to Judith Mossman. Mr. Friendly's model is the size of a small horse. It was to be a crawling creature walking on hoofed legs on its back and spurs on its front, moving in a very awkward shuffling manner and making a noise resembling fingernails on a chalkboard. It would act as a scavenger that ate the corpses of dead enemies. This behaviour would serve as a logical explanation for the disappearance of bodies that was done to improve the performance of the game. One of its proposed attacks was to pound the ground and knock the player's weapon out of his hand. It was even suggested that Gordon's glasses fly off and leave the player stuck in combat with blurry vision, a feature that would have been challenging to implement considering the game technology available at the time. Its most recent attacks in the game's development are shown in the model animations. They show it standing on its rear legs and slapping the player with its front arms, one being a double whip, as well as vomiting. Roughly the size of a panther, it was to throw its victims on the ground and attack them somehow with its absurdly placed mouth and some sort of beige tongue located behind its chin, while blocking them with its paws. Their unusually placed mouths are shared with the hound eyes. It was also to slash victims with the claws of its upper paws. Other animations see it crawling on its belly so that its victim cannot notice it. It was to run very fast, making it a very efficient opponent and waving its tail while being idle. Overall, its behaviour was to be more or less like a panther or any feline animal from Earth, hence its name. In certain footages, they also have the ability to jump at great lengths and much more higher than what a peak human would achieve through strenuous training, like being able to jump over a line of crates in a single attempt without landing on them first. In a soundbite from the playable Half-Life 2 beta files, Eli Maxwell seems to be telling Gordon about an entity called the Storm. In that speech, Eli warns Freeman to run when he sees a flicker of green light while being out there, as it managed to tear off one of his legs when he made the mistake to study it. while the final version uses a bull squid instead. The storm was therefore to emit a green light, somehow recalling the portals and the Resonance Cascade's green colour seen in Half-Life and its expansions. Eli also talks about having seen a particle storm tear gunboats filled with soldiers to bits, and believes that, contrary to some stating it is a mere electrical disturbance, he wishes the Resistance could communicate with it so that it could join their side as a powerful ally. This indicates that it is not a Combine creation, but rather a wild creature, sentient and powerful enough to destroy gunboats, kill living beings, and simply cut off a leg, as mentioned above, possibly acting like a black hole. It was to have alien decapods and a big horn. The tentacles were also used as its main weapon, though reused for the tentacle. It was to also have armour on its back, being able to take a number of bullets and possibly explosives, with the only way to kill was to shoot it in the facial area, similar to the Combine Guard. The robot grunt is a mechanical HEQ unit cut from Half-Life. There is no information available about where and when during the game it was to appear. However, it is used in the German censored version of the game. The Sactic was to be a macro virus created by the Combine. It was to be delivered by missile-like pods in numbers, generally to soften an enemy position before an assault. The Sactic was to seek out organic hosts, on which it would feed and use as food for the next generation of ticks. In this way, a small number of ticks dropped into an enemy stronghold were to multiply and create a great number of individuals. Mouthparts were to be able to splay open as part of a threat display. In addition, it was to make a clicking buzzing noise while bobbing its body up and down against the surface it would be attached to. The sac, the black growths on its both sides, whose use is not exactly known, was to be kept curled under the tick's body. Once fed, the sac was to unfurl behind the legs and dragged behind the tick. Its only known depiction shows the creature bearing markings similar to that of the gunship, said to denote delivery vehicle and task group. In the coast chapters of Half-Life 2, which was originally the Wasteland chapter, there were originally a barnacle variation named Sand Barnacle. According to David Sparer, the Sand Barnacle was meant to be hidden under the sand, and the only way to spot it would be a little depression above the ground, defining an area of danger. Should the player go in, the Sand Barnacle's tongue would come out, grab the player and pull it to the centre, where the whole barnacle would come out and start biting the player. He also mentioned using grenades from a distance would be the ideal way of killing the Sand Barnacle. An insect-like creature, not much is known about it, since it has no animations. It probably would have attacked the player by jumping at them and hitting them with its claws, or possibly hiding until the player stepped on it, like a bear trap. Its small size and probable fast speed would have made it an enemy difficult to hit and annoying in the vein of the head crab or the snark, thus its redundancy and possible reason for its cut. It appears to be a small biological alien weapon inside an egg-shaped black ball, which seems to act as a shell. When activated, the ball opens to reveal a turret-like organism, shooting something out of its 3 red eyes, similar to the Vortigaunt. The Stampeder is an alien enemy cut from Half-Life 2. It never went further than the concept stage and was therefore never scripted. Nothing is known about it apart from concept art by Ted Bachman featured in Raising the Bar and the fact that it was probably to stampede somehow. A bat-like creature with 6 eyes, the Stuka Bat would have been met in open spaces, at least during the Half-Life chapter's blast pit, on a rail, and on Zen, and attacked the player from the air with its claws. According to its animations and early gameplay footage, it was able to hang itself on ceilings like a normal bat, walk on the ground after being forced on it, aided by its single rear leg and its wings, and would not always attack the player. It would also emit bird of prey-like noises. It was to move by hopping from point to point and try to land on the victim's head. Some kind of fluid was to come from its central mouth, helping what it was planning to do with its victim. It was probably meant to be a headcrab/sactic-like parasite. Not much is known about the creature, other than it was to appear in Zen. It was more or less likely to be an allied creature, as there is no information of it being an enemy creature. The Wasteland scanner is a synth scanner, cut from Half-Life 2 in favour of the Shield scanner, another synth scanner. It stems from the recon synth concept. As its name implies, it was to be encountered in the Wasteland, notably in the coast chapters, in areas such as the Air Exchange, but also during the uprising in City 17. The zombie assassin, also known as the zombie alien assassin, is a headcrab zombie variation of also cut Combine enemy named the Alien Assassin that was in the earlier version of Half-Life 2. It is the prototype version of the fast zombie. At one point in development while the Alien Assassin was being developed, Valve wanted to create a zombified version of the Alien Assassin, a cut assassin unit for the Combine. The Zombie Assassin's model was likely developed in the early European era, late 2001, early 2002, or the 2003 era as the model was being created in 2002, as the headcrab on the Assassin is from the 2003 era when the Alien Assassin alongside other Combine units were being developed. Most of the Alien Assassin AI was reused for the fast zombie, while other parts of it were left in the animations. The Zombie Assassin, however, features no animations whatsoever as it just has a model of it standing. It is not featured in any official map. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I hope you enjoyed this video on Half-Life and its cut enemies. Shout out to my subs and hope to see you in the next video.